I'll never forget the sound of that envelope sliding across the oak table. The paper whispered against the wood like a blade being drawn, and when I looked up, Linda was smiling. Not a warm, grandmotherly smile, the kind that knew something you didn't. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes stayed locked on her son, my husband Daniel, and she said 4 words that instantly dried up every conversation at the dinner table. "You should look at this." My stomach turned before I understood why. It was Sunday. We did Sunday dinners at her house every week: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, my 3-year-old daughter Emma in a high chair smashing peas with her tiny fist. Usually Linda ignored me and doted on Emma like she was a trophy, not a child. But that evening, she'd been oddly quiet. I remember thinking she looked almost giddy, like a kid hiding a terrible secret behind their back. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was wrong. Daniel set down his fork. His brow furrowed as he pulled the envelope toward him. It wasn't sealed. Linda had already opened it. She wanted him to see whatever was inside, and she wanted him to see it in front of me. I didn't understand yet, but my hands were already trembling under the table. Something about the way she held her chin high, the way she kept darting glances at me and then back to him, told me this wasn't a birthday card. I watched Daniel pull out a folded document. It had a clinical letterhead I couldn't read from where I sat. But the moment his eyes hit the page, his whole body changed. His shoulders squared. His jaw tightened. The color in his face dropped 2 shades, then flushed red. I didn't know what was happening yet. But what happened next changed everything. It took him almost a full minute to read every line. The silence was suffocating. Even Emma stopped babbling and stared at her father with big, wet eyes. I wanted to reach over and snatch the paper from his hands, but something pinned me to my chair. Linda's smile widened just slightly, like she was watching a movie she'd already seen the ending to. That's when the first wave of real fear hit me. Whatever was in that envelope, she'd planned it for weeks. Maybe longer. But I still didn't see the full picture. Not yet. Daniel finished reading. He laid the paper flat on the table, and his hand was shaking. For a long, terrifying second, he looked at his mother. Not at me, at her. The woman who'd raised him. The woman I'd spent 3 years trying to please, failing every single time because I wasn't the wife she wanted for her precious son. And the expression on his face was something I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was betrayal so deep it looked like grief. Then he looked at me. And I'll never forget what I saw in his eyes, not accusation, not doubt. Pain. Pure, raw pain, the kind that comes right before a world collapses. I opened my mouth to ask what was happening, but Linda spoke first. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while gutting you alive. "I just thought you should know the truth, sweetheart. About little Emma. I've had my suspicions for a while, you know. So I took a little precaution. For the family." My brain couldn't connect the words. Suspicions. Precaution. Family. Then my eyes fell on the paper, and I saw the bold letters at the top: genetic testing report. Below it, my daughter's full name: Emma Grace Calloway. Age 3. Date of sample collection: 12 days ago, the day Linda had taken Emma to the park for a special Grandma Day and brought her back with sticky fingers and a sucker in her mouth. The day I'd thanked her for giving me a few hours to catch up on laundry. She'd swabbed my child. In secret. Without my consent. Without Daniel's knowledge. She had run a DNA test on a 3-year-old. The room tilted. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something, to yell, to throw the paper in her face. But he just kept staring between me and his mother like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have an answer. And I realized with sickening clarity that Linda must have believed the results would prove Emma wasn't his. That I had cheated. That my daughter wasn't his child, and that this would be the moment he walked away from me forever. I wanted to scream that it was a lie, that I'd never touched another man, that Emma was his, had always been his, could only be his. But the words got stuck in my throat because I could see her smirk growing, and I understood. She didn't care if it was true. She just wanted to plant enough doubt to break us. And from the way Daniel was gripping the edge of the table, I thought it might be working. I didn't see this coming. But the truth was worse than anything I imagined. Then Daniel spoke. His voice was quiet, calmer than I'd ever heard it. "Mom, when did you do this?" Linda smoothed a napkin over her lap like we were discussing flower arrangements. "I told you, sweetheart. I just took a little sample from her mouth when we were on our outing. It didn't hurt her. It was very simple. I mailed it off and they sent me the results. I only did it because I love you too much to let you be fooled. You love me." Daniel repeated the words without emotion. More than anything, Linda said, and for a split second her voice cracked with something that almost sounded like sincerity. "I couldn't stand the thought of you raising a child that wasn't." "Stop." Daniel's voice cut through the room like a stone through glass. Everyone froze. My sister-in-law, Karen, had her fork halfway to her mouth. Daniel's father, sitting at the end of the table, looked confused and vaguely horrified, but he didn't intervene. He never did. Daniel stood up so suddenly his chair scraped the floor. He picked up the DNA results from the table and held them in front of his mother's face, not shouting, not raging, just holding them there, his hands steady. "You read these results before you put them in this envelope?" Linda hesitated. Her smile flickered. "Well, of course I did, but I wanted you to see them for yourself. I thought it would be better coming from me than from some cold report." Daniel nodded slowly. Then he lowered the paper and he looked at her with something I can only describe as finality. "So you know what this says?" She blinked. "Yes, Daniel, I know what it says." Her tone sharpened, defensive now, the first crack. Daniel folded the paper once, then twice. He tucked it into his pocket. And then he said the 9 words that made Linda's face drop like a curtain slamming shut. "You just lost a son, Mom. Not a granddaughter." A small, choked sound came out of her throat. The color drained from her cheeks so fast I could almost see her skin turning gray. Daniel reached for my hand, and I took it, still not fully understanding, still suspended between terror and relief, but his fingers were strong and sure around mine. Linda scrambled to her feet, knocking over her wine glass. Red spread across the white tablecloth like a wound. Daniel, please, I was only trying to protect you. You can't be serious." He didn't look back. He lifted Emma out of her high chair with one arm, and I saw my daughter snuggle into his neck, completely unaware that her grandmother had just tried to destroy her parents. I grabbed my purse with shaking hands. The rest of the family sat motionless, trapped in the horror of what they'd just witnessed. And Linda, the woman who had spent years making me feel small, who had plotted to blow up my marriage at a Sunday dinner for everyone to see, was suddenly grasping the edge of the table, her mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. "Please," she gasped. "Please don't walk away. Daniel, I'm your mother. I'm your mother." He paused at the door. I felt his entire body tense against my shoulder. And for one agonizing second, I thought he might turn around and give her another chance. But then he pressed a kiss to Emma's head, and he looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes shattered the last piece of fear I'd been holding. "Let's go home," he whispered. And as we stepped into the hallway, Linda's begging turned into sobbing, the kind of raw, desperate sound you can't fake. The dinner, the family, the carefully constructed life she'd built, it all crumbled behind us. But I knew something she didn't yet. This was only the beginning. What Daniel would do next would burn her entire world to the ground. The car ride home was silent except for the sound of Emma humming softly in her car seat, completely unaware that her grandmother had just tried to detonate our family at a dinner table. Daniel drove with both hands gripping the wheel, his knuckles bone white under the streetlights. I sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, replaying Linda's face dropping, the wine glass tipping, the desperate howl that chased us down the driveway. I thought that was the end. I thought we had won by simply walking away. I didn't realize yet that walking away was just the first move. The real plan started the next morning. I woke up to find Daniel already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad, his laptop open, and the DNA test results laid flat beside a cup of cold coffee. He hadn't slept. I could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the rigid line of his shoulders. When he looked up at me, there was no rage left. Just resolve so cold it made the air feel thinner. "She committed a crime," he said quietly. She took our daughter's DNA without consent. In this state, that's a Class A misdemeanor at minimum. If she paid a lab to process it under false pretenses, that's fraud. I've already called Mark. Mark was Daniel's college roommate, now a family law attorney with a reputation for being absolutely merciless. I sat down across from him, still in my pajamas, still processing the fact that my husband had shifted from devastated son to battlefield commander in the space of 8 hours. But before I could speak, he slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a draft email addressed to every single member of his extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, his father's business partners. The subject line read, "What my mother did to my daughter." I read it. Every word was precise, clinical, and absolutely devastating. No emotion. No exaggeration. Just the facts. That Linda had taken Emma alone, swabbed the inside of her mouth without permission, submitted the sample to a genetic testing company, and presented the results at a family dinner in an attempt to prove I had been unfaithful. He included a scanned copy of the DNA report. At the very bottom, he added, "The test confirmed Emma is my daughter." My mother knew this before she gave it to me. Her goal was not the truth. Her goal was to destroy my wife and my child's home. I will never allow that. You should know who she really is. My hand trembled as I handed the phone back. "Daniel, if you send that, there's no going back." He looked at me and said 4 words that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "There's no going back anyway." He pressed send before breakfast was over. Within 2 hours, his father called. I listened from the hallway as Daniel put the phone on speaker. His dad's voice was shaky, disbelieving, but Daniel didn't waver. He walked his own father through every detail, step by step, while I held Emma in the nursery and tried not to imagine what was unraveling on the other end of the line. By noon, Linda had been blocked on every possible channel. Phone numbers, social media, email. But what happened next changed everything because Linda didn't retreat. She came at us harder. She showed up at our front door that evening, mascara streaked, pounding on the wood with both fists. I watched through the window as Daniel stepped outside, closed the door behind him, and stood on the porch like a wall. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught pieces. "You ruined me," she screamed. "I was protecting this family. That woman has turned you against your own mother." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He waited for her to exhaust herself, and then he said calmly, "You have until tomorrow to hire a lawyer. We're filing charges." Her screaming stopped. The silence was heavier than the noise. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Unauthorized collection of a minor's DNA for a private test without parental consent is not just unethical, it's illegal in our state under genetic privacy laws. Mark filed a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. The lab Linda used was subpoenaed. They confirmed she had misrepresented herself as Emma's legal guardian with sole decision-making authority. That was fraud. That was a crime. When detectives visited her house to question her, her neighbors saw the patrol car in the driveway for 3 hours. The story spread through her pristine suburban street like a wildfire. But I want to be clear about something. The legal trouble was never the most brutal part. The real destruction happened inside the family. Daniel's email triggered a chain reaction that no one could stop. His Aunt Patricia, the matriarch of the family, called an emergency family meeting without Linda. Accusations started pouring out. Cousins came forward with their own stories of Linda's manipulation. One revealed that Linda had tried to break up her son's previous relationship by fabricating evidence of infidelity years ago. Another remembered Linda pressuring her to get a DNA test on her own child because you can never be too careful. It wasn't just me. It was a pattern. A decades-long pattern of a woman who used secrets as weapons and then smiled at Sunday dinner. And then the investigator that Daniel's lawyer quietly hired delivered the blow that buried Linda for good. He found something while digging into her past. Something that had been hidden for over 30 years. Linda had always presented herself as morally untouchable, the perfect wife, the devoted mother who sacrificed everything. But the investigator uncovered a sealed court record from a county she'd never mentioned living in. A paternity suit. From before Daniel was born. It turned out that Linda had accused her own first husband, not Daniel's father, of abandoning her while pregnant. He had demanded proof the child was his. She refused. The case was dismissed, but the record was still there. And when Daniel's father saw it, he realized the timeline didn't add up. He ordered a separate test. Daniel wasn't his biological son after all. I'll never forget the moment Daniel learned that truth. He didn't break. He just sat on the edge of our bed for 10 minutes, staring at the wall. Then he said, "She spent my whole life making me feel like I owed her. And the entire time, she was lying about the one thing she used to control me." That was the moment the last thread holding her world together snapped. Daniel's father filed for divorce within a week. He froze all joint assets. He removed her from the will entirely, legally, and irrevocably. The house she'd decorated like a shrine to her own self-importance was put on the market before she could even pack. Her church group, her charity committees, her tennis club, they all received copies of the same email Daniel had sent the family. Invitations dried up. Phone calls stopped coming. She lost her entire social circle in the time it takes to read a 3-page document. The criminal case moved forward too. She accepted a plea deal that left her with a permanent record, a staggering fine, and 2 years of probation. She was barred from unsupervised contact with any minor, including her own granddaughter. The judge called her actions predatory and calculated. I sat in that courtroom and watched her lawyer plead for leniency while she wept into her hands. And I felt nothing. Not pity. Not guilt. Just the quiet, cold satisfaction of watching the woman who tried to destroy my family get exactly what she built for herself. And when it was over, when the papers were signed and the house was sold and she was left alone in a rented apartment with no visitors and no future, I finally understood something. She hadn't just lost a son that Sunday dinner. She lost her entire existence. I didn't destroy her. I just stood beside the man who made the choice she forced him to make. She tried to take my daughter's future. So she lost every single piece of her own.